Hello, Bronx Middle School. I salute you from our lockdown days. This is going to be my third video. Once again, Mr. Perez, third video. This video is the video that didn't want to be. That didn't want to be. I've been recording it. I recorded it like a couple times. We tried uploading it like 2 or 3 times and it didn't want to be. So I'm re-recording you this video that should have been with you last week. And today we're going to discuss the Sicilian Alapin. And the reason why we're going to discuss the Sicilian Alapin is because we recommended you, Mr. Levin and I, a system during chess club. We recommended you a system during electives. But I've seen a lot of you in the chess club don't play this system. And today I want to go over it so you have more confidence, and in the future I could see a lot more people actually using the system against the Alapin that we recommended during their games. So the Sicilian players will be really thrilled because this is another Sicilian video. It starts with e4, e4 pawn king opening, as Sicilian defense start. And the Alapin variation goes to c3. And the Alapin variation is an anti-Sicilian. I'm not too scared about, because it gives us up the center to black, and black could actually, if he plays the system we recommend, got a quite acceptable position where he easily equalizes with white. Okay, the one reason why I'm making this video is that a lot of you are playing 2d6, and 2d6 is actually a move that's acceptable. It's a sideline, but it's not the most aggressive approach against the Sicilian Alapin. So today I want to go over the system we recommended, because the system I see a lot of our scholars using is d6, and after d4 the main line goes knight f6, bishop d3, and g6. A lot of our scholars fianchetto, like if they're playing the dragon. And after knight f3, bishop g7, castle, castle, and h3, white gets quite an acceptable middle out of his c3 approach, which is not the best way to play against it, because if your opponent gives you something for free, if your opponent gives you the center, go ahead and grab it. Go ahead and grab it, because this is one of the most important issues coming out of the opening. Grabbing control of the center and grabbing space on the board. So after c3, our recommendation is to go ahead and play d5. After pawn takes on d5, you go ahead and play your queen takes on d5. And even though it violates one of the opening principles, which is taking out the queen too early in the opening, white is in no position of exploiting this misconception of taking out the queen too early, because you could observe his knight on b1 can't move out to c3 to attack this queen, because he already committed his pawn there. So after queen takes on d4, black gets quite a reasonable position, and we're going to go over the opening moves here into the middle game and possibly into the end game. So the most common move is d4, trying to not give all the center to black. And after knight f6, white continues his development with knight to f3. Black just does normal development moves here. Black just normally develops all his pieces. He's going to get a quite reasonable position, and for that he does bishop g4. Bishop g4, pinning that knight on f3. White right away, he breaks that pin with bishop e2, and then black does a normal developing move, which is e6. He wants to develop his bishop, which is an f8. So after e6, white attacks the bishop on g4, and you just move the bishop back one space because you don't want to get it taken by the pawn. Okay, so you move it back, and after castle here, you just keep on developing your pieces. You just keep on developing your pieces. You move your knight to c6. And right now, on move 9 is when you first have to be really careful in this opening. Because right in move 9, the main move here is bishop e3. And this is the one move you have to know by memory. The other move here is knight a3. And we're going to go over both moves in this video. Bishop e3 is the main line, and you really have to be careful here. Because if you allow white to push c4 and then d5, he might get some nice space in the middle. He might begin actually to get an advantage. So after bishop e3, that's your cue right here. Your cue has to be after bishop e3, you go ahead and take that pawn on d4. C takes d4, c takes d4, and then you keep developing your pieces normally. The main move here is bishop e7, but we also discussed in class the move that Kasparov played back in the late 1990s against Deep Blue, which was bishop b4. Actually, Sofia Polgar was also quite a good player back in those days, and she also liked this move. And the idea of bishop b4 usually is that you're going to trade this dark square bishop for this knight when it comes out to c3. But today I'm going to go over the main line, which you get quite a nice position, which is bishop e7. And after bishop e7, white continues to develop his pieces. He plays knights to c3, and he attacks your queen and d5. And right now, the best move is queen to d6. And you see that the queen on d6, you kind of get a swing here. So you can move your queen to b4 if it's necessary in any case, shape, or form. Also, your queen here has a lot of squares. So if it comes under attack, for example, by the knight on b5, which white would think it's quite a natural move, you can make the Kasparov move. The Kasparov move is queen to b8, although the queen has been moved to d7 and d8 in this position as well. And the reason why you play the queen to d8 is that right now you want white to be able to justify why his knight is on b5. Eventually it's going to get kicked back by a6, or if the knight goes to e5 and takes this knight, it will be kicked back once the pawn takes the knight back. So white doesn't get any better move than to move his queen to b3. And here, right here, we have two main moves. And the best move I recommend, which is the move that the top GMs play here, is castle. But there's also the alternative. And we said that the queen and the bishop was doing kind of a swing over here. So you could move your queen right away to b4. And actually you could propose a trade to white. I don't like this line as well as the other line, because I feel here white gets better play. He gets a lot more initiative in this line, and I'm going to show you why. Because right now white plays g4, attacking the bishop, and after the bishop moved to g6, he plays knight to e5. And right here, white does get a kind of comfortable position. Usually the game goes castle is the most common move, and after g5 there's two moves, and I believe in both moves white gets quite a comfortable position. There's the move knight takes d5. There's the move knight takes d5, and after knight takes d5, e takes, knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, and rook f to c1. And here, as you see, white develops a attack against the c6 pawn. So usually a common game continued here, bishop f5, but actually in this position, black was struggling a lot for equality because he attacked with a3, the bishop had to go back to e7, and after the rook took on c6, white got quite a confident position by playing b4 and by doubling his rooks on the c file. So you have to be really careful here, okay? So going back, after g5, we said there were two moves. The other move is to take the queen white away, which also gives white quite a good position. It gives white quite a good position because after he takes with his a pawn, you have to move your knight, which is under attack, and after you move it to d5, white usually just takes. You have to take back with your pawn, and he kind of gets a lot of pressure under this c file once again. Here, once again, the most common move is bishop f5, and after he takes on c6, usually what happens is that b takes on c6, the rook takes on c6, the bishop takes on e3, and then you get your bishop to the 7th rank, and it's actually attacking the pawn here. It's attacking the bishop, and this position is really hard to guard. So that's why I don't like queen to b4 right away. I recommend castle. Castle, I think, is the best move in this position. And we're going to look at the position that arises usually after castle. Okay, usually, right now, white takes the rook out to d1. And the reason why he takes out the rook to d1 is that he has this IQP, this isolated queen pawn. And he wants to trade this isolated queen pawn by making a push to d5. So this position right here, you have to understand that we're battling. It's quite a positional opening, and we're battling for the d5 square. So we're battling for the d5 square. The Alapin is a positional opening where you're going to be battling for squares. You're going to be battling for position in the board. So usually black tries to control the push. White kind of looks for a little breathing room for his queen, and he plays a3 because if the knight ever goes to a5, he wants to have a safe knight retreat for his queen. Black kinds of begins expanding on the queen side. His whole idea is to play a6, b5, and maybe knight a5 to c4 and have a central square for his outpost for his knight. Okay? Right now, white brings his last rook into the game. He wants to make sure that after all the trades, his pieces are active and are ready to go. Black continues his plan. He plays b5. And here, just here, white finally gets his push. He gets his push, and he gets the d5 pawn push. And this is really important because IQPs, isolated queen pawns, are really good in the middle game to attack. But once we transition from the middle game into the end game, they become a weakness. So here, white is signaling that he's ready to transition. He's ready to transition, and he doesn't want to have that weakness once he transitions into the endgame. Because it becomes a weakness, and usually if it's attacked enough by black, he'll be able to win that pawn. Okay? So he pushes d5. It's not a gambit because we'll see that white has an intermediary move where he wins the pawn back fairly quickly. The first move black makes is he attacks the queen by taking his knight out of the way. The queen feels the pressure. He moves back one space to a2. And then we begin a series of trades where momentarily black is up a pawn, but white gets this really nice intermediate move. White gets this really nice intermediate move, which is bishop to c5. And after queen f6, white takes back the pawn. White takes back the pawn. This is the position where is the most critical. Is the most critical position in the middle game going into the endgame. Because in this position, you have two moves. You have bishop takes f3, which is the move I recommend. And then you have bishop takes c5, which is the move I don't recommend because I think black gets more activity in this position. So usually bishop takes f3 happens. And after bishop takes f3, just now you see why the a6 b5 push was so good for black. Because right now you have a really nice outpost on c4 for your knight. And if you take with the bishop, bishop takes bishop, to simplify a little bit, the queen will just take back. If b3 usually, which is a sideline, the knight just reroutes via e5 and reaches a quite comfortable spot for everything. And there was a game that went just like this. And this is a quite good endgame for you to play if you're black, because you're equal in this position. The main move over here, though, is a4. And black gets a pretty good endgame either way. Usually knight e5 is played. And after bishop e4, so he doesn't trade the knight for the bishop, we just go ahead and move our knight back to reroute it. Possibly, if they allow me, maybe I'm going to the f4 square. White moves his rook behind his bishop, probably to attack this queen in the e7 square. White goes ahead and take, and the bishop is pinned, so he has to take with his queen. And once this happens, black gets quite a comfortable position. He moves his rook to d8, attacking the queen on d5. And this endgame is totally equal. If white ever takes an a6, black gets to take the pawn and b2. So this would be an exemplary endgame that would be played out of the main move that we went over, the bishop e7 move in the Sicilian Alapin. I highly recommend this line because white doesn't get an advantage. Actually, black fairly easily equalizes the position. But there's another move. There's another move that's not bishop to e3 that we have to go over to. So the other move we went over in class was knight to a3. And knight to a3, you have to be really conscious. Because knight to a3 has a lot of tricks, traps, that you must be cognizant. Because if you're not cognizant, you may lose fairly quickly. So usually what happens is that the pawn takes on d4 either way. You go ahead and take. Always whenever that knight and b1 goes out, or the bishop and c1 goes out, that kind of signals. You have to take the pawn because you don't want the c4 d5 push, okay? So then the white doesn't capture right back immediately, but moves his knight to b5. And the reason why he moves his knight over here is that he's threatening to fork you. He's threatening knight c7, and he forks the rook, the king, and the queen over here. So black defends, and then white at this point recaptures the pawn back. And black begins trading down without any problems. We trade down our light square bishop. Then we trade down the knights on the board. Right now, quite simply, you continue your development. Nothing has happened, nothing gained, nothing lost. White tries to throw out another trick out, which is putting his rook behind the queen on the knight. So if he has a discovered attack like knight to b5, the queen will come over attack and it can't take the knight either because it will be defended by the queen. So black goes ahead and plays a6. And after knight f3, black just goes ahead and offers a trade. A trade that will make the endgame resulting really easy to play. So black goes ahead and plays his queen to e4. White says, no, thank you, I don't want to trade. Black finishes his development by castling. White goes ahead and attacks the black queen. The black queen moves out of the way. White continues to attack it, and then you get queen a5. And this is quite a good middle game. Notice that white can't double up on the d file because his a2 pawn would be hanging here. So after this, usually a good plan would be to trade. You know, black could try to seize control over this file. And this middle endgame is equal for both sides. Okay? So this was the lesson for today. We wanted to go over the system we taught you for the Sicilian Alapin, which is 2d5. The more trendier system among the top GMs is knight f6. If you have any time during this lockdown, you could also look forward to researching this other system, which is quite great to play also. But for now, I would highly recommend you to play d5 instead of d6. d6 is, there's nothing wrong, but it justifies 2c3. It justifies 2c3 because then white does get in d4 in a quite great fashion. So this was my third video. I hope this time we could upload it. I hope everyone's staying safe in home, and I hope everyone is having a good time playing in the weekly online tournaments. Remember, tomorrow we play the Battle of the Middle Schools team tournament again. So be ready for tomorrow. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.